And finally, the last thing that we're going to check for and mess with and add into our program for this week is we want to actually make this game a little bit more like it's going to look in the final version. So we want to add in a bunch more gems, a bunch more baddies, so that way we can see each and every one of them on the screen in the way that they'll be doing. And then our last bit that I'll upload later on this week will involve adding in some movement for all of those baddies, and then checking when and if that game should be over. So the last things that we need to do right now is we're going to add in a lot more gems, a lot more baddies, and then we'll check them in the way that we had been doing down here, and we'll add in the actual game actions. All right, so with all of that in mind, let's start by, rather than having a setup and just creating one of our gems and one of our baddies and one of our players, we can keep the player exactly how it is. However, instead of having individual gems and baddies that we need to keep track of, it's going to be a little bit easier for us to have an array list of our gems and an array list of our baddies. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to make, an array list that will have a bunch of gem objects that we'll call gem list. And then we also should have an array list of all of our baddie objects that we'll call baddies list. Just like that. Okay, great. Which means that I don't need to think about my baddie individually and my gem individually. This is going to make things mad at me for a moment, but don't worry, we'll fix all of those errors later on. So we're going to have an array list of these types, which means I no longer should create an individual singular gem or an individual singular baddie. Now in setup, I need to finish the initialization of that gem list. It's going to be a new array list for me. And also for my baddie list, it's going to be a new array list. Great, okay. So now they exist. Of course, things down here are now upset with me because I'm not actually creating a singular object for our gems and our baddies, but now they exist. So in the moment right now, currently our gem list and our baddie list is empty, and we're going to want to add a bunch of gems and baddies to it. To keep it simple for right now, we're going to just go ahead and do that all in setup. We're just going to designate at the beginning how many gems are going to be, how many baddies they're going to be, and we'll just create them all at once. So for us, the easiest way to do that is just to make a for loop, and we're just going to create a bunch of gems and a bunch of baddies. Every time we go, each time we go through that for loop, we'll create one gem and one baddie, and then we'll loop over for however many times we want. So I'm just going to create a really generic for loop that starts at 0. It's going to go up until, I don't know, let's for right now say that we'll make 15 of each. So we'll have 15 gems and 15 baddies. So we're going to have a generic for loop that's going to then add gems and baddies to the list. So what we'll want to then do is we're going to want to say, okay, well, let's gem list and add whatever our gem object is going to be. And we'll want to do the same thing for our baddie list. Baddie list. We'll want to add whatever the object is going to be there. And because we're just going to add in a new object right in this way right here, I could go through the process of saying, let's make a gem. We'll call it G. Ooh, it's gems. Sorry, gems. And we'll call it G, and it'll be a new gem for me. And I'll add in all of the info here. I could add in, I don't know, 30, 30, 20, and then we'll provide it with a color. And I could do it like this, and then I would add G every time. But then if you notice, every single time, all of my gems that I add in would be at the exact same location, the exact same size, and then when I add them in, it's really not doing all that much. So instead of having them all preset to be at 30, 30, 20, likely we'd want their size and their color to remain the same. And for us right now, our gems are the red ones, so I'll make it at least be red for us. However, if we put them all at the same position, you won't even see that there's multiple of them. So likely what we want to do is we'll either want to have them increment throughout the screen and use the for loop to help us do that, or you can choose to have them be a random thing. So I think what'll be easier for us to do is to have them be random, and I'm going to do everything by creating variables first, and then I'll consolidate in a bit. So we're going to create an int that'll be an x value for us. And we're going to then use math.random to help us figure that out. Remember right now, math.random, what it's going to do is it's going to give us a decimal number or a double between 0 and 1. So like 0.6 would be a value that it could use. So we then need to multiply that value by whatever our distance is going to be. We don't want numbers between 0 and 1. We want numbers that are going to be between 0 and the width of the board. So we'd actually want to multiply by that width. And then we need to cast this to be the integer value of all of that. Multiply it by the width and then turn it into an integer so that it stretches it out so that random number is now not between 0 and 1, it's between 0 and 600. It would be a decimal to start with, but then we'll cast it to be an integer with that last little bit, and now we have a random number between 0 and 600. And then finally, we could do that same thing. Well, I'm just going to copy that exact same thing for our y direction, our y variable. However, this time, instead of using width, technically we would use height in case, in the off chance, later on we change the size of the game board, or it's no longer a 600 by 600 square and it becomes a rectangle. So then what I would want to do is I can throw in that x and that y, and now each time I run through that for loop, it'll be at a new xy position, and then we'll go ahead and keep its size as 20 and its color for right now as that 255, meaning 25500, meaning that it's red. Okay, great. So that's the way we can do that. And now we're going to do that same thing. However, this time for the baddie, I'm going to do it in the shortened, without all of these extra lines version. I can actually add everything in right here into this. So I do not actually need to create a new variable for that gem. So all I'm going to do is inside of here, let them know that the thing that I'm adding is going to be a new baddie object. And then I'll put in the three things like we did before. So I'll put in 30, 30, 20, and then I'll add in its color, which is blue. So 255, like that. And baddie list is happy to add in that new baddie at that position. However, like we said before, we then want to randomize that x and y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this bit right here. That is that x direction right here. And then I'm going to copy this bit right there to be our y direction right there. And now I've got all on one line. Add a new baddie with a random x, a random y, its size is going to be 20, its color is going to be blue, and it's all done on one line rather than being done in 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the shortened version if you want to go to that. If you want to keep the math.random something separate so that way you can change that logic later, that's fine as well. If you want to keep it all 4 lines, cool by me, but I just wanted to show you both versions. So what this should hopefully do is, now when we run this program, we should hopefully see lots and lots. Oops, we have collision detection that we need to get rid of first. So let's go ahead and just comment this out for a moment. But hopefully what should happen once we get to the program actually running, we should see now lots and lots of gems and lots of baddies on our screen. And uh-oh, we see none. Oh yeah, because guess what? We've made a list of them, but we've done nothing on our graphics. So great, they exist. There's a list of them. There are now 15 gems and 15 baddies that exist in the list, but that's all that they are for us right now. We then have to go through and actually draw them all out. And the easiest way to do this, again, would be to use some for loops so that we can access all of the things inside. And for right now, particularly, we're going to use what we call a for each loop, which we learned about before in class, which is in this fashion. You say for, and now what I really want to do is I want to be able to say for each element in gem list. And what I mean by that is go through, get the first element in that gem list, which is a gem, do some stuff with it, then move on to the next element in the gem list, which is also still a gem, and keep going. So what I'm really saying is for each individual gem, which we'll call, I don't know, G, that exists inside of our gem list. That's the way that we want to read that notation, but that's the way that we type out the syntax of a for each loop. So go get that first gem that we'll call G inside of gem list. We'll do some stuff with it, and then continue moving forward. Go get that next element. We'll momentarily call it G, and we'll do some stuff with it. So that's our for each loop to access all the gems in gem list. To draw them, really. Okay, so when we draw them out, what we really want to do is the first thing we want to make sure happens is that we fill with a G.color to make sure that we have the right color, and then we're going to draw a rectangle at that G.X, G.Y, G.size twice over, because remember, in this rectangle, the last two commands, we need the X, we need the Y, we need the width, and we need the height of that rectangle. So we'll go in and we'll say for each gem in the gem list, draw in there, and let's check that out. So now hopefully we should see lots of red gems showing up. And look at that, yes we do. If I close this and I ran it again, they should show up at new random locations, and of course they do. Some of them overlap. If you want to add in logic to not make them overlap, you can do that as well. But now we have all of that logic going. So now we're going to do that same thing. We'll do a for each loop on baddie list. So we'll say for baddies, that we'll call B, that are in our baddies list. And again, we'll want to fill with the correct color. So for us, this will be B.color this time. And then we'll want to draw in that rectangle that for us will be B.X, B.Y, B.size, B.size. What did I do here? There we go. All right, and now we should see some blue and red rectangles show up randomly on that screen. And yes, we do. Great. And again, if I reran this, they should show up at a new random position every single time, because their locations have been randomized from the beginning. Okay, great. We are almost there. We have now got everything moving, or everything on the screen that we want. We are not going to add in the movement for the baddies yet. We will do that eventually. So we're going to want to have some ability to do that later on. So because we've made this method called move, inside of here, once I draw each of those baddies, I will want to tell it to move in the way that we want. Right now, this method does nothing. It's an empty method. We will fill it in the next week, in the videos that I post later on, but we'll want to call that method move so that we have the ability to do it later on. So eventually it'll draw it, and then it'll allow that baddie to move in the way that we want it to. And the only other thing that we really want to check for is when and if we do all these collisions. Remember, we did that collision detection from before, and then we commented it all out. But what we really want to be able to do is know if and when these things are in fact colliding. And a really easy way to do that is right here, once you draw in each of these, is have it do one more check and just say, hey, you right now, this gem that's right here, are you colliding with the player? If so, do something. If not, do nothing. And same with the baddies. So we can do it right in this location right here and call this collision method that we had from before, that we made in our previous video, and pass in all of the information about the player just like we did before. However, this time we want to do the game stuff, which for us means what? We want the gem to respawn elsewhere. And we want to increase the player's life. So in order to do those two things, we're going to have to reset the XY of our gem, and we're going to then want to change some things about the player's life. I'm noticing, however, though, that in our player right now, we don't actually even have any way that we're keeping track of the number of lives. So let's go in over here and we'll add in a variable, because likely we would want our player to know how many lives they have. And let's say when we start and we first come up with a player, we'll say that they get, I don't know, 3 lives to begin. And then when they collect a gem, it'll be adding right now whatever that value is, so we'll be adding 2 to the number of lives that they have. So the first thing that we'll want to do is we can now say p1.lives, and we'll increase their lives. So I could just say plus plus if I wanted and have no value, but because I have this thing that's called value that exists inside of gems, I'm going to increment my p1.lives by that gem value, g.value. Because then later on, if I wanted to change that gem value, it's no longer set to just always be 1. So that is my gem value. The next thing that I would want to be able to do is respawn that gem randomly. And the easiest way to do this is we're just going to create a new random X and Y for our gem. So I'm going to copy the thing that I had from above, but then we'll have to make a few edits. Right now, I'm not trying to make a new variable. The thing that I'm actually trying to do is I want to say that, okay, well, this gem's X position is going to get randomly reset to be some number in the X direction. And then I'm going to do that same thing for that gem's Y position. Randomly reset it to be a number between 0 and 600 for us. And those are all of the moves that we really need to do, or actions that we need to take if a gem and a player do in fact collide. Okay, great. So now what should happen is, let's try to run it. Me as the player, I should get to run all around the screen. Let's see, I'm going to intersect with this gem really quick. And do you notice that that gem left and this gem just appeared out of nowhere? And, I'm chasing them around. Right now, again, the baddies aren't moving in any way, but as I intersect with those gems, they are disappearing and reappearing somewhere else on the screen like we want them to, so that's good. We can't see what's going on with my lives right now because I don't have that printing out in any way, so let's go ahead and check that one last little bit. Let's just say print out lives equals, and then we should add in p1.lives. Great. So let's check to make sure that our lives are increasing as we collect all of those gems. Lives equals 2, lives equals 4, lives equals 6, lives equals 8. I'm confused why it started at 2, but that's okay. For now, we can leave that alone, and you can add in other things that you'd like as it goes on. But notice that they are incrementing as I collect these gems, just like we want them to. Great, okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to do the same collision detection, but we'll want to do it for all of our baddies. So again, we'll want to come in and we'll say, okay, if I'm the baddie and I've collided with that player, there are some actions that I would want to have occur. p1.y and p1.size. There's some actions that I would want to have happen. For our game stuff this time, what we would want to do is we'd want to decrease lives, and we have something called using the damage, b.damage, and reset player position, which we already had be a method that was built in that we called reset. Oh, I see, I put my lives in the wrong spot, silly me. I thought that was my constructor. There we go. So when I hit reset, that would reset my lives to 3, which is not really what I want to have happen. I would want that to happen inside of my constructor right there. There we go. That'll then start us off with 3 lives, and then we'll increment in the way we want. Okay, but we do in fact have this player method called reset already built in. So if we do in fact collide, oops, where did I go? Wrong one. If we do in fact collide with a baddie, it would be really easy to say p1.reset. And it'll put that player back at the beginning, which for us right now is at 0, 0. In my original version, I had us starting in the bottom left corner, which then meant we were at 0, 600, so I could change that later on if I wanted to. For right now, we'll leave it at 0, 0. So we'll have the player reset its position, and then we'll also want to decrease the player's lives. So then we'll want to say p1.lives is equal p1.lives. And then we will want to subtract off whatever that damage is. Okay, great. So then we'll be doing the things that we want. Let's add in one more print statement to make sure this is doing what we want it to. And again, we'll say lives equals and print out the player's lives, because now it should be working the way we want it to. And let's see what happens. Okay, so now, as I move around, if I run into a gem, it disappears and my lives increase. But now, when I run into a baddie, I reset and my lives should decrease. The baddie right now does in fact stay in the same place, and my lives are decreasing the way that I want them to. The gems increase my lives. Let's just check to make sure I can collide with a different baddie. As soon as I do, it resets me and my lives decrease. Okay, great. So we've got some game maneuvers working. We're going to add in the last little bits in the next week, which will allow the baddies to move, and then we'll be able to detect for the end of the game, and then we'll have a fully functioning gems and baddies, and you'll be able to add in some extensions.